Good day. Hey, how you guys doing? So, all right, got a World War III update for you. This one, it's big, but it's not big. But it is definitely interesting. Letters kind of let up a bit, some heavy clouds out there. But apparently, there was a huge offensive that happened. Something like 200 tanks, I think around Mariupol or whatever, moving in on the city there. It looks like Lavrov was talking to John Kerry and one of his other guys, and they pretty much gave the green light for Poroshenko to disarm the right sector. So I think it's now pretty official. So again, that tells you, again, they used the right sector, just like I said. And I still don't understand why I get so many thumbs down on that video, even though it's like one of my second most viewed videos. On, after the Maidan coup, I said, look, they're going to use these guys to do the coup, and after they're done the coup, they're going to throw them under the bus. And you could see that they were trying to do that right away. And it looks like now, the right sector, I haven't heard anything new from them, but they did do a protest about a week or so ago, saying that they were, they weren't going to overthrow the government yet, but it's coming. It's definitely coming. But what they were saying is what they wanted was to declare a state of war with Russia, that it wasn't just insurgents, they were terrorists, and that they were actually at war. They wanted that, and they also wanted to rearm, I guess, like the right sector themselves, and so they're still armed. It's just the doctrine is that they're not going to be resupplied and stuff like that. So basically, the U.S. government is pretty much said, yeah, go ahead, disarm the right sector. So again, you're going to see revolution after revolution in there. So for the Donetsk People's Republic, the DNR, the LPR, those people, hunker down, the genocide's coming. At that point, again, I've said it all along, and I still stick to my guns on this, Poroshenko does not have control of the Ukrainian military. So we could possibly see, the Ukrainian military, I don't know which way they're going to go. I really don't, because the argument, like some of my viewers have said, look, these guys, the right sector and the Azov Battalion and Kiev 1, Kiev 2, they're fighting together. They're brothers in arms, and they're not going to turn on each other. I would say that makes sense. It's very logical, but we don't know what monkey wrenches can get thrown in the fact. Remember, there's a lot of different factions fighting. It's a mercenaries ball in the Ukraine. There's a lot of different factions in there. So we have to also look at it that it might not necessarily be an entire either or, but we could see breakaway factions, fighting, say, on behalf of the Ukraine, but against the Azov Battalion in the right sector, and the LPR and the DPR, and whoever else, whoever else is in there. We could also see people loyal to Poroshenko which I don't know if this guy, I can't see there being too many Ukrainians loyal to Poroshenko, but then again, you don't know. That could take up arms against the Ukraine military and the right sector. It's a possibility. I mean, you can't count it out because, again, it's a mess over there, right? So, with that said, we'll have to keep an eye on it. I think it's calm before the storm, but the offensive that's happened, again, which would violate the Minsk II agreement, again, is a sideshow thing. The U.S. central bankers, the EU, the IMF, that Anglo-American Empire thing, they paid for the overthrow of the Ukraine to get the Ukraine. Russia is not going to give up that for a lot of reasons. Number one, it was a breadbasket for the Russians. It was a food source. You're cutting the food source to Russia. You're cutting one of their major food sources or food suppliers. It was manufacturing for Russia. It was also they got the Navy port in the Crimea. Now there's also another talk out there, and again we'll have to wait and see. Everything's always on the grapevine and rumor until it actually happens. But what they were saying was that Obama and Putin may have come to an agreement that if they give up on Syria, because the Russians have made are talking about sending 2 massive paratrooper groups into Syria, and I'm sure that would be a full. We know how the Russians invade places. I mean, they just passed the anniversary of the Georgian invasion. Trust me, people remember that. When the Russians come to town, you remember it. It is very Red Dawn-ish. And if they go into Syria, it's going to be very Red Dawn. It'll be a Red Dawn for sure for Syria. So that will completely back Assad's troops, which then will give Assad's troops to the upper hand advantage even if it's not even a direct conflict, just the fact that they're giving the reprieve to Assad's troops so that they can advance and just hold the ground that they take, just supply them with new weapons. Again, these guys are already willing to fight, so the Russians only have to supply them. They don't really even have to, they don't even really have to give any boots on the ground with the Syrians. Just give them weapons, But weapons and training usually go hand in hand. And again, if they use the Russian forces as basically hold the fort, ain't that your liking, dog? Hold the fort and allow the Syrian army to go head to head with ISIS and the Free Syrian Army, then yeah, they're going to make advance, and that will undermine the Israeli. Again, you have to understand the whole point of overthrowing Assad is for Israel, so that once they overthrow Assad, then they can go after Iran. The reason why they don't go after Iran first is because Iran and Syria have a pact. Now, if the Iranians throw the Syrians under the bus, that would be a game changer altogether, because then. But I don't see that. Again, it is coming clearer and clearer that the U.S. State Department only wants to really take out Assad. There is no real goal to take out ISIS. Yeah, they bomb a few places and stuff like that. But the guys running these jihadists at the top, look, jihadists are killing people that as soon as they find out that they're connected to the CIA or whatever, they kill them right away. We saw, just link after link again, the United States has been dropping weapons in the Middle East and arming proxy groups for years and years and years. To think that they're not arming ISIS is kind of a bit naive at this point. It's pretty open and obvious. You can track it through McCain. You can track it. Joe Biden admitted it. They just they dance around it, but it's openly admitted. So there's no conspiracy. It's conspiracy fact. Joe Biden said, yeah, we gave money to Saudi Arabia to arm the Free Syrian Army, and the Free Syrian Army just keeps they keep joining ISIS. Al-Nusra Front, the Khorasan group, all there's about 50 groups in there. It's all tribal, right? So, but they're all ISIS, ISIL, IS. They're all the same kind of groups. They're all going along that same jihadi mentality of a one caliphate. Basically rise of the Ottoman Empire minus the Ottoman Turks. It's that kind of thing. So it's going to be Sharia law everywhere there. The majority of the Muslim world is for this. They support ISIS. But is it going to be Sunni, Shia, Alawite, Wahhabist? That's the factions that are fighting. So that's where the infighting is. Is it going to be Al-Qaeda? Is it going to be the Taliban? Is it going to be Al-Nusra Front? And again, there's a whole gaggle of them. So, but they keep getting absorbed by the main core ISIS. But again, it's built up of many tribes in the region. So when you look at it like that, what's going to happen is if they give up Syria, because you have to understand, Russia's done a lot of trade deals with Syria for gas pipelines. They have the Basatar too, so they have an interest there too. They have a big interest there. Plus, it's going to run gas pipelines through Turkey. Again, I think Turkey's being thrown under the bus very slowly, the same way Saudi Arabia is. It's kind of one of those things. What I think they're doing in Turkey is getting the people committed to fighting against the ISIS, but they're not really taking out ISIS. They're really trying to get them to fight Assad. And you could kind of see it, because even the Turks are out there saying, we'll have to put overthrowing Assad on the back burner until we deal with these rebel groups from within. Oops, power just went out again. And the point with that is that you can clearly see it, that every time you talk to this government or that government, it's overthrow Assad because he's the number one terrorist organizer. He's the problem in the Middle East. But they're even accusing the Assad government of supporting ISIS. It makes no sense. It makes no sense whatsoever. And when you listen to Assad, again, yes, okay, he is a tyrant like all the Middle East dictators. They're tyrants, but he is stability in the region. When he goes, look, we could look at Libya. We've got thousands of people floating around because of U.S. foreign policy from a destroyed country. The illegal war in Libya, it wasn't an illegal war. And look at all the people dying in the Mediterranean trying to get to Europe. It's a complete, utter humanitarian crisis going on there. And yes, Hillary Clinton is probably the number one that should go to jail for that, but also Obama, all the gaggle heads that voted to do that, and even up here in Canada, everybody in Britain that voted to do that, they should be... Look, you had David Cameron out there a couple of years ago. People need to go to help fight ISIS. They need to join the Free Syrian Army. Now they're all silent on it. Now if you go and do that, you're a terrorist. See how they backtrack? Because it's failed policy. But it's not failed policy because it's the goal is to overthrow Assad so they can get Syria so that they can then defend it, so they can use it as a staging ground to attack Iran. Because Iran is going to be a hell of a war. That one is going to be a big war. The Houthi uprising and stuff like that with Saudi Arabia, again, it becomes the U.S. foreign policy also is kind of goes with the proxy war doctrine that if they're fighting each other, they're not fighting us. But if we look, we know for sure where Israel stands on this. Israel can't wait to bomb the shitballs out of Iran. The problem is the second they do, they lose global support if they haven't lost it already. So basically, all the wars are bankers' wars. We know that, but almost every war in the Middle East is for Israel. You say, "Oh, that's being too generalized." Just listen to Netanyahu. I mean, we know what their doctrine is. Go to war with Iran is what the doctrine is. They can't wait to strike Iran. They've been talking, oh, they're going to have a nuclear weapon in 5 minutes. They've been saying that for 40 years now. And, whether the Iranians do, again, this idea of preemptive strike here, preemptive strike there, and that's all. That's what Netanyahu's out there saying. Look, we have no choice, but we're going to have to do a preemptive strike on them. So he's buttering you up to tell you, yeah, we're going to be doing this. And look, if Iran gets a nuclear weapon, and they don't need one, they've got enough rockets they can wipe Israel off the map if they need so. And that will be their last act of defiance. You don't kid yourself. They will use what they have. If the U.S. attacks them, and this is one thing the Iranian government, after Iranian government has said, you attack us, we wipe Israel off the map. That's their trump card. So they're not going to attack Israel until Israel does something. If they think that the sign is nigh, that's it. That's it for Israel. And they don't need nuclear weapons to do it. Every jihadist on the planet is going to turn tail and go, ISIS, the leaders of ISIS will be killed because there's too many of them that are getting linked to the CIA, al-Baghdadi and stuff like that. Again, it's so openly obvious what they are. Many jihadis are quitting because they're like, we don't want to be, we don't want to be fighting for the U.S. State Department. And you've got even, a lot of U.S. soldiers that say, hey, and pilots saying, hey, and not just U.S., but other pilots saying, hey, we don't want to be ISIS's Air Force. Why are we bombing Assad's troops? Which, if you really wanted to get rid of ISIS, okay, and look at the Middle East, who would you rather get rid of, ISIS or Assad? Yes, Assad, you could probably get him voted out later on. But people voted him in large numbers because they know the genocide on the other side is waiting for them. Now, the thing is if they were to back the Assad regime militarily, you've got the guys there that are willing to fight. You get the guys on the Turkish border, and you just herd them right into that. You get the guys in Israel, you just, again, we'll just have a big turkey shoot. It'll be like herding cattle. We'll just sweep the entire country. This is what I think the Russians are going to do. This will get rid of ISIS. And that's the problem. They need ISIS to overthrow Assad. So the rumor is that Putin and Obama, maybe that's what that phone call was about a couple of weeks ago, the mystery phone call, was that we'll give you the Ukraine, or concessions that make concessions on the Ukraine, which Ukraine, like I said, Ukraine's going to get thrown under the bus at one point, whatever the reason be. The economic collapse hits, the U.S. can't defend Ukraine, everybody's going to, trust me, the U.S. backs out, everybody backs out. Lithuania and Poland, I don't think they're going to go toe-to-toe with Russia without the U.S. backing them. If they had to, they would, but I don't think they're going to start it. I think they're going to dial back the bravery level on that. So if that happens, Russian tanks roll in, they'll normalize the situation in 45 minutes. There will be no such thing as the right sector. There will be no such thing as the Azov battalion. A lot of people are going to disappear, and they're going to be dead in a ditch somewhere. Russia's willing to do this, and they can do this really quick. They won't do it right now because, there's too many people that can... They don't want to get tied up in a war, but if they know that they could get absolute victory, they're going to take it, that type of thing. So if they give up Syria, because Israel is more interested in having Syria off their border because of the chemical weapons and stuff like that, and I'm sure Assad still has some, but he's not using them on ISIS. He's said it years ago. We'll get rid of our, and Russia played this card very well. They said, look, if you guys, and John Kerry, I'm sure he must have been pissed about that. Because he's like, well, if Assad were to give up his weapons, the Russians jumped on it really. Give up your weapons, then it takes away. And we see the U.S. is still pushing to get in there. They're just so hard hell bent on overthrowing Assad, and nobody really knows why. Oh, well, he's a horrible dictator. So we go into North Korea tomorrow morning? You know what I mean? Like, it just makes no sense. It's for Israel. It's as obvious as possible. So, I mean, when your army becomes a geopolitical army, whether it's a Canadian army, U.S. army, British army, I think soldiers are starting to pick up on. And this is why recruitment keeps going down. Is people join serve a noble cause in the military. But they don't want to be a geopolitical army. They don't want to be, okay, well, Israel doesn't like this group, so we have to go to war for them. And then when they come home, there's not enough money in veterans affairs. There's always enough money to go to war, but never enough money to take care of the people when they come back, right? So pick your government, doesn't matter, liberals, NDP, they're all, conservative, they're all going to go there. The Democrat, look, the Democrats, the GOP, you're going to war, it doesn't matter. Look, Democrats got you more wars than you could possibly imagine right now. So with that said, they want, I don't know what concessions they'll make on Ukraine, but I think that, like I said, it'll be East Ukraine, West Ukraine. I'm still sticking by that. I can see it coming. That's why I'm sticking by that. So with that, we'll have to see what this big offensive, how it worked out. I know there was a few tanks lost already. What they're trying to do is say that, no, the Eastern people are getting ready to make a big push and stuff like that, which I don't think so, because, yeah, the Russians are backing them. They're not backing them to the point where they can really hold off major offensives for very long. What the Russians do, this is probably what they'll do in Syria, is like, when they'll just stay behind, they'll train up guys with the special forces, but if ground is starting to get lost, then they come in and they kind of do a bit of an intervene, retake the ground, then they give it back to the other guys and they start fighting again. They're going to do the same in Syria. It's kind of the way the Russians do it. It's the least. It makes it the least amount of losses for them. Now, as far as and again, I'm not saying the Russians are good guys either. There's no good guys in these geopolitical games at all. So just a lot of suffering people that are getting killed in the crossfire. So with that said, we don't know what concessions, but we'll see it in probably a few weeks. But the idea that, okay, well, it was Webster Tripoli that was, I think a day from the making of this video, talked about this idea of disarming the right sector. So that could be concession number one. Okay, so what's concession number two? I mean, the Russians are going to get a lot. For them to not intervene. Look, and here's the thing: the international community isn't saying, "Oh, great, you're willing to put troops on the ground." Look, it's not popular in Britain, it's not popular in Canada, it's not popular in America to put troops on the ground, but you guys are willing to do it. You think the international community would be there? Go, Russia, go! You're willing to piss your guys away there? Go for it. Go for it. Do you want to do the dirty work and the heavy lifting? Go do it. You want to go fight ISIS? You go right ahead. You go right ahead. But they're not doing that. No, because that's going to throw a monkey wrench in the plan. And here's the thing too, because you have to understand, if Russia backs Assad, that means right behind the T-90 tanks and the T-72 tanks, which a couple of years ago there was video footage of GoPro video footage. If you want to see tank battles, you can find tons of Syrian tank battles out there. They're unbelievable. No, it's not a video game. A lot of guys are getting killed. All tanks burn. You want to see when I say all tanks burn? You watch Tank Wars in Syria. Don't do it with little kids around. It's quite graphic. You'll see what I mean. All tanks burn. It won't matter. You could send Abrams in there. If you don't have a good infantry backing your tanks are pretty much sitting ducks. A tank is relatively easy to take out. However, it's a hell of a force of firepower. But when we're talking basically urban warfare, door-to-door combat, that's really, you need a massive force and well-organized force to be able to move your tanks and your, you got to understand, the average anti-tank weapon is going to have a 600-meter range. Okay, that's like over 1,900 feet. So that you can be sniped out pretty easy by that. So you really do need to be able to lock it down. Air power. One thing that the Russians, I think, would be sending in, and this is what I think Israel would be the most nervous about, is air defense systems. So when Turkish or Egyptian aircraft come in to strike Assad stuff, they'd shoot down Saudi, Turkish and stuff. I don't know about Saudi right now, but Saudi Arabia and Egypt are making deals with the Russians right now. They are jumping the American ship. They're getting off of it. They're just doing it slowly because they don't want to. They don't want democracy JDAMs coming into their countries. But we see U.S. puppet after U.S. puppet is failing in those regions. But they're doing weapons deals with Russia now. So they have before. This is nothing new. But it seems like, okay, you have an Egyptian Aegis warship. Great. Now and you have Russian commanders walking around on this warship. How do you think the Su-24s, had the equipment to jam the Aegis warship in the Black Sea? They knew what to target. So while the U.S. State Department is handing like F-16Cs, the state-of-the-art F-16s to Egypt and stuff like that, remember, these guys are just going to show the technology to the Russians. they don't even have to reverse engineer it. They'll just say, "Oh, this chip is vulnerable to this. All we have to do is, focus our radar on this one spot, and not one specific spot on the aircraft, but in one area, one frequency level. This is the frequency it works on. We can hijack the frequency. We do that. It's flying blind." So, and this is, Obama's failed U.S. foreign policy failure all the way around. Completely incompetent. You don't give people in the Middle East weapons, period. You don't. Why? Because it's too volatile. You don't know what loyalties they're going to have 2 weeks later. That type of thing. So, and not only that, you're adding fuel to the fire. So they shouldn't be doing that. That said, are the Russians doing it? Well, the Russians are the Russians. They sell weapons to anybody with a pulse. So, but are the Americans any different? But the thing is if they back Assad, that means they're going to have, they'll have troops in there, and those guys, they'll be pretty good. But they bring in tanks, they bring in particular Black Shark helicopters and stuff like that. A bunch of frogfoots, tons and tons of artillery, radar, S-300 missile systems. They're going to lock down that country pretty good. It's not going to happen overnight. Again, we know what happened in Afghanistan in the 1970s, 1980s, but it's a different time now. The Russian Spetsnaz, these guys use the exact jihadi tactics, the guerrilla warfare. Again, I said in an earlier video, you have 12 hostages and 2 terrorists. Russian Spetsnaz bring in 14 body bags. Problem solved. They say, well, the hostages were collaborating with the terrorists because they were standing in front of the terrorists as human shields. Traitor. Problem solved. There we go. No more terrorists. It won't happen again. Oh, we shot through 10 people, but my bad. Problem solved. I fixed, no problem. There we go. So that's kind of what we're looking at. And this, again, picture, how nervous Turkey, Israel, and stuff like that will be with Russians basically, coming through the backside of Syria with Iran behind them. So it puts Israel in a bad spot because they got the deal between Syria and Iran, which the Iranians, backed up by the Russians. I mean, that's a triple-pronged threat that they just can't handle that. So to me, it's a question is, does Israel hate the people in Syria more, or do they hate the people in Ukraine more? Or maybe not hate, but who do they care about least? Well, they'd rather have control of Syria. Therefore, Ukraine will be thrown under the bus. How they're going to do it, I think they're just going to let the Ukraine rip itself apart in a massive civil war throughout the entire country. Well, that's happened. The eastern side will, kind of be able to create a barrier and a line. More Russian support will be allowed to come in. The United States will completely turn a blind eye to this, and it'll just go away in the news. So if you're Ukrainian, you might want to... Again, the Ukrainians are in the fight of their lives, no matter which way they go. They're screwed no matter which way they go. Joining up with the EU was the death nail in their coffin. Look, do they get free travel to the EU? No. They certainly don't. They're not allowed. I mean, you can float through the Mediterranean and come in and get, get stuff, but don't you dare come from Ukraine. You know what I mean? Like we see it. It's a mess for the Ukraine. I really do feel bad for the people there. Because none of them need to be killing each other, but I think they're coming to the conclusion. You heard enough of the military guys saying, no, we fight for the Ukraine, not for the, But the problem with the right sector and the Azov battalion and stuff like that, their mandate is just to kill Russians. So they're going to ethnically cleanse. Yes, the Russians have done it in the past. I get that, that type of thing. But, 2 wrongs don't make a right. It has to end somewhere. So with that said, the people in they put down their eastern Ukraine, they put down their weapons. They're dead. That's it. As far as China and Japan, where they're still ramping up, and who knows what will happen there, when it'll happen, but we see the Navy buildups and stuff like that, so nothing really new to report there. North Korea and South Korea fired a few shots at, apparently a couple of South Korean soldiers stepped on some North Korean landmines somehow near the fence that weren't supposed to be there, so how they got there, who knows, but again, it is a minefield, so there's a bit of tension going there. So usually a couple of times here, North Korea and South Korea fire shots at each other. Remember, there's an armistice there. It's a ceasefire. It's not peace. It's just basically, if you don't shoot, we don't shoot. So it's not even really a ceasefire. It's an armistice. So there is no peace deal between North Korea and South Korea. That said, the South Korean people are pretty ticked about the loss of their soldiers, which, of course they're going to be. And they're starting to get a little bit heated too. North Korea, South Korea is just as volatile as Japan, China, Taiwan. It's the same tension between all these countries. It's a grudge match that goes. I still don't know which way Vietnam will swing. It does seem to be kind of pro-U.S., but it kind of doesn't. The Philippines, they're kind of ticked with all the new U.S. military bases being opened up there. They don't want to get dragged in it either, but I don't think they're going to have a choice. Once China starts shooting, they're shooting at everybody in the region. That's a given. Yeah, so that's kind of what's going on the front there. We'll have to keep an eye on. Oh, and there's a couple more Arctic drills starting up. Right now, the Russians are doing a drill. It's an air defense drill. They're bringing out some pretty old stuff too. They're bringing out Eagle shoulder-fired missiles, stuff like that, and some Tuareg air defense and Zu-23s, that type of thing, as well as some old artillery guns. And it's a competition to who could shoot down the most and stuff like that. So it's your typical kind of military training drill. Nothing new there. On the other side, I forget the name of the drill, but it's going to be going on right through till I think October or something like that, or August, end of September. I can't remember the date that they said. Up in the Arctic, I'm not sure exactly what the drill is going to consist of, but your typical stuff up in the Arctic. So I'm sure the Russians will respond to that as well. And and then on the Jade Helm front. That's still kind of moving along the way it's moving along, but we are starting to see people rising up throughout the states. You have Oathkeepers in Ferguson right now. I think there's been another shooting. It's kind of getting kind of crazy. Look, when this takes off, I don't like giving dates and times. A lot of people are saying, well, the economic collapse is going to happen in September because somebody said September. It's a fool's game to give you dates and times because it is so manipulated, we don't know. But we do know this, that staying the course we're on, it's inevitable that we will get into a war. And to me, I'm still sticking to my guns of no economic collapse till war comes, or civil war, war between Israel and Iran, which, again, we are allowed to be sacrificed 33 or 34 to 1 per Israeli soldier, so that's the cost they're willing to do. So it means they're willing to sacrifice 10 times that. That's what they're willing to defend Israel at. So it is what it is. I'm not anti-Israeli people, but I don't like their government there. I never did. They're Zionists. They're masquerading as Jews, but they're not really Jews. They're Zionists. Zionists and Nazis, if you understand Nazi ideology, you understand Zionism and all. They're using a biblical reference to support the Zionism, but at some point someone's going to have to call it out on the mainstream media. And one little last thing on Donald Trump there. And I caught a snippet of the video of the two black sisters out there giving the oh no you didn't sitting there to Megyn Kelly kind of because they're calling bullshit, they're calling BS. They knew it was political correct BS. People are sick and tired of it, and this comes to show that when people state their positions honestly, whether they're brackish or not. Donald Trump is a brackish man. There's no sugarcoating that. But he came out and he says, look, they come at me, Fox News comes at me with silly questions and stuff like that. I'm just paraphrasing what he's saying. And he says, completely a personal attack on me. That's exactly what it was, to sabotage. He goes, I'm not going to apologize. People are fed up with that. So is Donald Trump the real thing? I don't know. Well, again, I'm still going with the idea that when it gets down to the two-horse race, we'll know. But the idea that if, let's say, because I doubt the GOP is going to elect him, meaning he'll run as an independent. Now, the GOP, if they are running him and they elect him, it's because they're hoping that they won't win. But the problem is he's saying everything that people are resonating. Hitler said a lot of things that people resonated with. Obama said a ton of things that people resonated with. Problem is it's not what they say, it's what they do. But with Trump, I think he is telling you listen to him speak, he doesn't read a teleprompter. You gotta, maybe he's just a con man, who knows? He is a businessman, he's calculated, he is smart. I don't care if you don't like him, he is a very calculated man. He is not an empire builder, rich guy because of, being politically correct, being nice. He is a Zionist compliant. His daughter converted to Judaism after marrying this guy who was known connection to the Zionist party, so... But at this point, it doesn't matter if you vote left or right, you're connected to the Zionist party. But at least if you can get him that far, Maybe the next guy that comes along, Ron Paul. I think he's still the best bet, but you need another Ron Paul. Until you get another Ron Paul, the United States is screwed. But people are resonating with Donald Trump. He is playing the strongman act. I think he would keep you out of World War III because Putin would think he's a lunatic. Hillary Clinton will get you into World War III because Putin doesn't respect Hillary Clinton. He looks down on her, and she is a psycho beyond psychos. Libya, if Libya is any indicator what she is willing to do to a nation, I feel bad for the people of Libya. Nobody deserves that, and yet these people walk free. So, anyway, that's just my take on things. So I'm going to wrap it up around that. Again, I know like anything, we have to keep an eye on it. Not everybody's going to agree with everything I say, and that's fine too. But we do have to keep an eye on these little dots and these geopolitical games. The human cost is just so astronomical now. It's brutal. I can't say that the new Ferguson riots, which are they're clashes right now, but they're going to turn into riots pretty soon. I think this is attempt 3 to get the race civil war going, but this time you are starting to see the Oath Keepers coming out armed. Could be a recipe for disaster. I don't know. But we do know that the black youth is starting to, not all of them, but, you had, a couple of kids take shots at the police officers. Again, a grievance group with basically a disenfranchised mentality mixed in with an entitlement mentality that I can do what I want because you disenfranchise me is a very, very lethal combination. They do want every black person in the United States to get up and riot so that they can have their race war, because then they can use that for an economic collapse. Plus, Jade Helm is already in play. It would be perfectly suited for that. Jade Helm is, again, the soldiers are on patrol for World War III for an economic collapse. Madrid fault line, let's go. Food shortage, which is going to happen anyway because of the droughts. The list goes on and on and on. They're ready for anything. Gun confiscation is not really, that doesn't happen until martial law is fully declared. But anyway, and I'm not picking on the black people. Look, they're targeted. Look, 13% of the African American population is out of that, 61% of them are middle class. They're doing well. Nobody focuses on the African Americans that are doing well for themselves. Just the 8% of that 13% that is in extreme poverty. But yet the extreme poverty of other groups is completely, a homeless guy, they're still making the claim of white privilege to homeless white guys on the street. You know what I mean? You're privileged to be sitting on there, you damn honky. You know what I mean? So it's divide and conquer. Understand it's a subversion program. They tried it with Trayvon Martin. They're trying with this. They're trying again. Look, the police chief in Ferguson's, I think he summed it up best. I don't think the guy's lying to you. He says, look, there's people intent on creating riots. And it's always the same thing. Throw Molotov cocktails. We were just peacefully protesting, but they're not. The peaceful protesters aren't giving up to people that are, throwing the Molotov cocktails and breaking into stores and doing stuff like that. They're not doing that. So you have to call it fairly. That said, yes, there is a problem with the militarization of the police. I say it's more the militarization of the police than racism, but that's my opinion. Maybe you agree. Maybe I'm not saying racism doesn't exist, but racism is on all sides anyway. It's, it is what it is. But we have to watch that too because it is a part of the chess game of divide and conquer. Again, the world elites do not want to be put on the hook for the next financial collapse. It's going to be biblical in the sense of the amount of people that are going to die from lack of resources, mainly starvation. Next will probably be lack of crucial medications, heart medications. Just look at Greece. What's happening in Greece is going to happen to the world to the factor of 10 times that. It just compounds way out of control. But anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. So if you like this kind of content, please consider making a donation to the channel. Perhaps you maybe want to advertise on the channel. You can pong me a message. Maybe for a small donation to the channel. Maybe I'll give your channel a shout out. Maybe if you have a product that's your own and you would like me to give that product a shout out, by all means, we'll work something out. We'll read the YouTube agreements on advertising, and we can go from there. Next to that, rate, subscribe. Definitely share these types of videos. I know they're sensitive material, but we live in a time where it's too dangerous to be politically correct anymore. If we don't speak about these things openly, we're all dead. I'm not saying that with a grain of salt. I'm saying that literally. We're all dead. I'm not saying it's going to happen tomorrow. But the sign is pretty nigh. When you see the train track is out up ahead, you have to pull that handbrake. Right now, there's nobody pulling the handbrake, so I can only give so much warning. Those who listen. Those who don't put food away. Do what you got to do. Don't be paranoid, don't be scared, be prepared, that type of thing. You know all the slogans. So anyway, next to that, be true to yourself, be true to others, always do the right thing, and have yourselves a great day. Good day. Hey, how you guys doing? So, all right, got a World War III update for you. This one, it's big, but it's not big. But it is definitely interesting. Letters kind of let up a bit, some heavy clouds up there. But apparently there was a huge offensive that happened, something like 200 tanks, I think around Mariupol or whatever, moving in on the city there. It looks like Lavrov was talking to John Kerry and one of his other guys, and they pretty much gave the green light for Poroshenko to disarm the right sector. So I think it's now pretty official. So again, that tells you, again, they use the right sector, just like I said. And I still don't understand why I get so many thumbs down on that video, even though it's like one of my second most viewed videos. On, after the Maidan coup, I said, look, they're going to use these guys to do the coup, and after they're done the coup, they're going to throw them under the bus. And you could see that they were trying to do that right away. And it looks like now, the right sector, I haven't heard anything new from them, but they did do a protest about a week or so ago, saying that they were, they weren't going to overthrow the government yet, but it's coming. It's definitely coming. But what they were saying is what they wanted was to declare a state of war with Russia, that it wasn't just insurgents, they were terrorists, and that they were actually at war. They wanted that, and they also wanted to rearm, I guess, like the right sector themselves, and so they're still armed. It's just the doctrine is that they're not going to be resupplied and stuff like that. So basically, the U.S. government is pretty much said, yeah, go ahead, disarm the right sector. So again, you're going to see revolution after revolution in there. So for the Donetsk People's Republic, the DNR, and the LPR, those people, hunker down, the genocide's coming. At that point, again, I've said it all along, and I still stick to my guns on this. Poroshenko does not have control of the Ukrainian military. So we could possibly see, the Ukrainian military. I don't know which way they're going to go. I really don't, because the argument, like some of my viewers have said, look, these guys, the right sector and the Azov battalion and Kiev 1, Kiev 2, they're fighting together. They're brothers in arms, and they're not going to turn on each other. I would say that makes sense. It's very logical, but we don't know what monkey wrenches can get thrown in the fact. Remember, there's a lot of different factions fighting. It's a mercenaries' ball in the Ukraine. There's a lot of different factions in there. So we have to also look at it that it might not necessarily be an entire either or, but we could see breakaway factions, fighting, say, on behalf of the Ukraine, but against the Azov battalion in the right sector, and the LPR and the DPR, and whoever else is in there. We could also see people loyal to Poroshenko try, which I don't know if this. I can't see there being too many Ukrainians loyal to Poroshenko, but then again, you don't know. That could take up arms against the Ukraine military and the right sector. It's a possibility. I mean, you can't count it out because again, it's a mess over there, right? So, with that said, we'll have to keep an eye on it. I think it's calm before the storm, but the offensive that's happened again, which would violate the Minsk II agreement, again, is a sideshow thing. The U.S. central bankers, the EU, the IMF, that Anglo-American empire thing, they paid for the overthrow of the Ukraine to get the Ukraine. Russia is not going to give up that for a lot of reasons. Number one, it was a breadbasket for the Russians. It was a food source. You're cutting the food source to Russia. You're cutting one of their major food sources, or food suppliers. It was manufacturing for Russia. It was also, they got the Navy port in the Crimea. Now, there's also another talk out there, and again, we'll have to wait and see, like everything's always, on the grapevine and rumor until it actually happens, but what they were saying was that Obama and Putin may have come to an agreement that if they give up on Syria, because the Russians have made are talking about sending 2 massive paratrooper groups into Syria, and I'm sure that would be a full. We know how the Russians invade places. I mean, they just passed the anniversary of the Georgian invasion. Trust me, people remember that. When the Russians come to town, you remember it. It is very Red Dawn-ish. And if they go into Syria, it's going to be very Red Dawn. It'll be Red Dawn for sure for Syria. So that will completely back Assad's troops, which then will give Assad's troops to the upper hand advantage. Even if it's not even a direct conflict, just the fact that they're giving the reprieve to Assad's troops so that they can advance and just hold the ground that they take.